All right, this is Ronan Schnibben from Fraudbeat, here with Jordan Shamir, CEO and co-founder of Yofi, startup dedicated to fighting return abuse. Uh, Jordan, say hello to everyone.
Yeah, howdy. Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited. We've been chatting for a while, so yeah, grateful for you having me on.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So I guess the question that always struck me, and I never really asked you like point blank, was when and more importantly, why did you found Yofi?
Yeah. So I have two other co-founders, Alex and Andrew. And Alex is actually my sister. I think that's like well documented, well known. But Alex and Andrew were in charge of the bot mitigation and policy abuse team at Nike, right? So that's where they actually met, was actually fighting bots and policy abusers at Nike. And at Nike, we were using, a variety of different payment fraud companies. But what we ended up seeing is that like the future of fraud was actually moving more to post-purchase, right? And moving to customer support. And like what we ended up founding is basically like customer support was getting bombarded with questions like, hey, my item was missing. It never arrived. I put on a pair of shoes and I went on a run and it ripped for the first time. And what we ended up seeing is like typically a fraud team will have a handful of people, while customer service will have hundreds of people on their team,
Right.
right? And basically what we ended up seeing is that like customer support can override any fraud rule, but also more importantly, any customer complaint can be fraud. It's just harder and harder to detect because you don't have the
Hmm.
visibility, right? People are taking advantage of your policies. And what we end up seeing is post-purchase fraud is very subjective, where like payment fraud is very objective, right? Someone stole your credit card, someone's doing a chargeback. This is a lot more subjective and depends on what a brand classifies as fraud or abuse.
I'm not a sneakerhead, but I've had everyone I think has had fraud issues that they've dealt with at some point, especially if you're American.
Yeah.
And I always feel when I talk to someone on the other end, like I've had an issue with a bank recently, they're always sort of like sussing me out, like I feel it that they're sussing me out, trying to see if I'm trying to defraud the bank, and as opposed to like reporting fraud, So like I feel that the tension when I talk to the customer service people, how do you address UX issues while still handling abuse?
Well, I think the first one is just getting visibility to it. Like we work with some massive brands across the world, right? Like we just had a big PR release with like UPS and Happy Returns yesterday.
Right.
And it's also just understanding like what do you deem as abuse? So it's actually coming down to understanding like what is happening, right? And I think the big things that we do is like we sell to clients that have no fraud, forwarder, riskified, signified, but we take the time to just build the business case. Hey, what do you define as a return abuser, right? How much are you losing? What's the reverse logistics? What's the business impact of that? Right. So it's actually, I think the first step is just providing the visibility because it's not a question of like if abuse is happening. It's just how bad is the abuse happening at your brand.
Okay. And then if you're trying to keep a good user experience, I guess you're saying it's about defining what is a good user experience versus what is enabling abuse, or
Yeah, and I think the way we think about it is like e-commerce right now has been ruled forever by hard-coded flows. Everyone gets free returns. No one gets free returns, right? Everyone gets refund upon scan. Everyone is refund upon inspection, or I'm just going to approve every claim that comes through. And what we see is that like I think part of changing the policy mindset is also changing the notion of not everyone deserves the same policy, right? Like not everyone is the same, right? So how do we start designing solutions that actually have segmentation and personalization into it? And just give you a couple examples that we do with a lot of our brands. It's like a lot of our brands on returns want to do return upon scan, right? So the moment it's dropped off at the carrier, the refund is processed, right? That's a
yeah.
great customer experience. You have less customer like Wismo, where's my order? Where's my return? Where's my when's the money back on my credit card, right? But not everyone deserves that right based off different risk scores. So what we do a lot of times is we actually integrate into the return management solution for a lot of our customers. And we basically start saying, hey, this subsector of bad actors, hey, we're going to go delay it. Maybe we're going to add a fee. Maybe we're going to disable their ability to do an online return and they have to go drop it off at Happy Returns or at a store, right? So we actually are taking this different notion and starting to create these custom policies while also giving visibility to the customer service agent to know that this person's also likely going to try to like hit you up and do some social engineering to get what they want.
And so you apply additional friction to, or your customer would apply additional friction to sort of change the calculation on their end, whether it's worth trying to scam or abuse the policy.
Yeah.
So what distinguishes Yofi's solution from its competitors? I mean, there are I don't have a list in front of me right now, but I know there are a bunch of other companies that are doing stuff in the space.
Yeah, I mean, like I think the big one is that like we are purpose built for it, right? So like the way we integrate with information, like we actually don't use any information from payments, which is kind of weird when you think about fraud. It's like we actually don't care about anything from the payment basis. And like we
Wow.
have some really
Okay.
deep integrations into what we do with carriers. We actually integrate directly into customer support tools. We look at things from a semantic layer. We look at image analysis. We integrate with like 360 plus carriers around the globe so we can find different anomalies. We integrate into warehouses because fundamentally what we're solving is a data silo issue, right? Okay, what is the warehouse saying versus what is customer support saying when they're talking to the agent? How do we change these different policies? So it's actually something that like what we do is very flexible and very customizable, but we're purpose built for this post-purchase experience, right? So like the big announcement we had with Happy Returns yesterday is like we're actually building what with Happy Returns and just our other merchants is actually drop off fraud, right? Like people dropping it off like a return in store, right? Well, the
Yeah.
interesting that you're talking about is like a lot of payment providers, like, traditional fraud companies, if it's in store, they don't care, right? Because the card is present, right? And the way we were also thinking about it is that like with abuse and a lot of this post-purchase fraud, it happens both online and in store. It's not just consolidated at the online checkout payment. So how do we provide this visibility both from like an e-commerce perspective, but also from a retail perspective? By the way, there's a lot more sales happening in physical retail than online commerce by
Still, yeah.
magnitudes, right? So like how do you provide that surface area coverage, not just for that one really small subsector of the checkout, but the entire customer experience? Doesn't matter if it's online, in store, employees, external customers, doesn't make a difference.
So you're basically an omni-channel solution then.
Yeah, 1000%.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that. That's actually super interesting. Okay, and that makes you like way like relevant for a much broader spectrum of companies.
Yeah, and because like I think the way that you think about it is like anyone that has issues with your brand is going to come to customer support, right? And let me give you a good example, which is like a manufacturer for electronics, right?
Yeah.
So say I buy an Xbox, right, at Best Buy and I'm Microsoft, right? Hypothetically, I could say, hey, I have an issue. Best Buy is like, hey, you can go to the manufacturer, right? So they might be able to show you a fake receipt that they bought at Amazon or that they bought at Best Buy or something along those lines. And your customer support agent has like a lose-lose situation that they need to decide. Is this a legitimate claim? Is it not legitimate? Because you don't have any information about the order outside of the receipt. So what can we do to start taking that information, the tonality of the text, all those interaction to be able to actually come up with a risk score, right? So we support clients even with like omni-channel warranty fraud.
Interesting. I can think of something that happened to me that was along those lines too. This hits like personal pain points for me. I love this. But well, let's go to the next question. I think that what was it like recruiting Yofi's first customers? I mean, as an entrepreneur, that's got to be really hard. I mean, how did you get the first couple? Well, I get maybe was it Nike? I mean, who was the
No,
first
no, no.
customers?
Yeah,
Can you
yeah. We
say?
we we don't, yeah, just on record, we do not work with Nike. But like I think the first one was tough, man. Like we ended up sending, I don't know, hundreds of cold call emails. And our first clients were three of them. I'll always remember is JD Sports Canada, Likelihood, and Stashed, right? Like sneaker stores, right? Selling collectibles. Because when we came out of the gates, like our OG name was Botnot. So we really focused on collectibles and sneakers and different things like that. And it was hard. Like we just kept bombarding and selling like thousands of emails, hundreds of emails and cold calls. And then eventually like people picked up the phone, right? And we were able to provide like really quick value and we developed great relationships with our clients. And I would say like the first year and even still today, like Yofi's been around about 3.5, 4 years.
Mm.
A majority of our success is still referral based. It's still community based. Someone's hearing about us, someone's recommending us. And like, I think that's been like a really important thing just as like an entrepreneur is like two things. One is like your clients are not clients, your clients are partners. They want you to be successful and they also want to be involved in the process of solving a pain point that's annoying them day to day, right? So like flipping that mentality of like your early clients are just as good as your employees, if not better. And then the other notion of like you have to build in public, right? Like build in public, like competitors, like there's the fear that competitors might see it, but also like execution is everything, right? So we are an extremely transparent company. We post all the time, like different things we're seeing, how we're catching things, like different fraud tactics we're seeing, right? Because like ultimately it's a universal enemy, right? Like fraudsters are taking advantage of folks across the board, right? Like we're happy to work and we do work with people in theory that are our competitors.
So share with the community, I guess, the broader fraud fighting community would be something you could say.
Yeah, broader fraud fighting community. And then also like don't be afraid to ask your clients for referrals. Because a lot of times, like if you're solving a problem for them, they talk to other retailers and brands around the same problem. So they're super happy to make introductions as well. Like really
Yeah,
treat
I've seen that in I've been in the fraud industry for over a decade, and I see that also in like my past roles, that word of mouth is still very huge in the fraud prevention space in terms of getting deals. So that makes sense. I want to
yeah.
go back. 'Cause I sort of had a pause, a mental pause there before, and when you were talking about your technological solution, you didn't mention AI. So I was wondering, are you using AI, and if not, why not?
Yeah, of course, we're using AI. We're not using like any open LLMs, but like we use AI under the cover, right? And I think the big reason why is that like there is like a level of control and a level of like feedback. Fraud is very nuanced, right? So like we don't fully trust like a, open source LLM to be able to just throw all the information and things to come out. But yeah, like we use fully AI based since the day we started, right? Like we started with unsupervised, supervised based learning, right? Everything along those lines. But yeah, as we start evolving more and more, like especially some of the image detection, some of the semantic detection, all of that is using AI based tools, right?
Yeah, that
Um,
makes sense. Okay.
but the thing that we try to do is like we actually don't try to like I hate the word AI in the sense of like it's just a buzzword, right? Where it's like I think it's very important in the notion of like yes, you can use AI, but like we are focused on solving fraud, where we actually see a lot of companies are just throwing data science methodologies to solve fraud or AI methodologies to solve fraud, but they're missing the nuances, right? And I think you know this from being in the fraud space. It's a heavily nuanced world where the nuances actually make a distinct and impactful difference. Even your terminology, even discerning the difference between fraud and abuse, right? And creating
Right.
those classifications make a huge difference. Like it's the small details matter in our industry.
Yeah, well said. So, congratulations on the acquisition of Yofi by No Fraud.
Yeah.
I think it's what, like a month old you announced ago, or it's not that old. It's still fresh news.
Yeah.
And it only took you a couple of years to get acquired. So, hopefully it's for good reasons.
Yeah.
We don't have to go into the financials, but but why did the acquisition of Yofi make sense for both parties at this time?
Yeah, I mean it's great news. We're really excited and like it's funny. I think about this is like even when we started talking to Scott, who's the CEO of No Fraud, I was like, I don't know, like, he's a great guy, but like I don't know if we're ready. But for us, like we want to be the industry leader in the space, right? Like we have a really big vision that's CX first, that's focused on customer intentionality. And the nice thing that No Fraud had is one, a culture that we really vibed with and loved with, right? Like we really liked their leadership. We really liked their customers. Their customers said great things. And it made sense for us because like No Fraud is very much like a traditional fraud company, right? They focus on credit cards, they focus on chargebacks, they focus on things very much at the payment level. We never did that, right? And so by being able to like capture what we do pre-checkout and post-checkout with like the fraud layer, we can enhance our data. We can enhance our risk scoring. We can enhance the solutions we provide to clients. We can provide like that complete, I hate the cliche 360 view of a client, but
Yeah,
we can start doing that more, right? And it just
yeah.
made sense for us where they had a great distribution, we had the technology, and like we really want to be the industry leader, right? Because like the cool thing that we're fighting is not just like industry leadership and revenue. Obviously, that's great. And our investors and board obviously care about that. But it's also like, how do we serve good humans? How do we protect retailers and merchants that are struggling at a time of tariffs, cost of acquisition going, as high as possible, consumer spending being down? How can we help them actually prioritize good customers, right? How can we help them unlock those different experiences, right? And unfortunately, fraudsters, abusers, and bad actors are a decent reason for the cause of these, higher level of friction for policies and the increases in prices, right? So it's a ubiquitous problem that's impacting everyone that's shopping, even though they don't realize it's impacting them.
Yeah, that's also well said. Out of curiosity, just from an entrepreneurial standpoint, how long were you talking to No Fraud before you guys sealed the deal?
Um, I think close to 9-ish months, 9, 10 months. Because like we were partners before, right? We were co-selling together. We were, selling from a partnership perspective, and it just naturally the conversation just escalated, right? We went from dating to engaged to married. And so it was just kind of a natural, organic progression.
All right, so 9 months from engagement to marriage. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Well, so I think things change for you now that you have access to the resource base that No Fraud provides you. But what was I assume one of the reasons, and you're saying because you want leadership in the market and all that. So sort of like
Mhm.
the implied statement from that is that there was a barrier to your growth before you joined No Fraud. I mean, what was holding you back, if there was
Yeah.
anything?
I mean, look, like our revenue this year increased 20 times year over year. So we were growing at a really fast clip. And the biggest thing is like, how could we support this at a very fast level, right? Like we wanted to grow faster and quicker because we viewed we had a pretty large market share. So how can we sell to an existing install base? But we were growing really quickly, right? Like some of the things that we had to consider is like, how do we build a customer success practice? I was handling customer success and onboarding. How do we
Oh
start
wow.
building a finance department? How do we start building and start maturing from a startup into more of a like larger stage startup with more established practices and procedures, right? Like those were a couple of the options that like we had to consider. Like we had no means, we had plenty of cash, we were growing really quickly, we could have easily raised the fundraising round, but we ended up seeing like this was a really good combination and something that we were really excited about.
Got you. And so you're sort of leapfrogging over like the initial growth problems of like an early stage to mid stage startup by joining up with No Fraud, I guess. You sort of have the established customer success, you have established finance. You don't have to do a lot of trial by error.
Yeah, yeah, 1,000%. And like for us, like we are a product and we've always been an engineer-driven organization, right? Like Yofi, like at the time of exit, I think was 14 folks. And this year we hired our first salespeople, right? So, and the salespeople have been phenomenal. Like we've had a great year, like some great clients we can say on record, some clients we can't say on record, but like we grew really, really, really quickly. And for us, it was just like building these practices and like we just saw a great opportunity and we were really excited. Like we love the no fraud team. We love the vision. We were fully aligned from that perspective. And I think you'll start seeing some really cool stuff in the beginning of next year that we're doing jointly. That's actually very different than I think where a lot of fraud or like traditional payment or fraud companies are moving.
That's sounds great. We're going to keep an eye out for that. That leads to the last question, which is it could be what you're planning or it could be stuff that you're just noticing as someone who's cued into the market as an observer. What problems in retail fulfillment, and it doesn't have to be fraud or abuse, what problems in retail fulfillment experience are still unsolved in your opinion? What's out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the high level, like one of the biggest one is just like what is personalization, right? Because like personalization is beyond just saying hi Jordan, right? But how do you start moving to like truly personalized experiences, right? Like one of the things we talked about is like, hey, everyone can get different return policies, right? Everyone can get different loyalty, right? Like the surprise and delight does not have to be like this overwhelming, everything has to be discounted. And I actually believe like the future of loyalty is actually being changed and completely going away. um,
Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
like I think about this even from like an agentic commerce where like I think like you're gonna have bot to bot based communication, right? But like I think it's gonna be prompted where it's gonna be like, hey Jordan, Alex's birthday is coming up. Here are the things that we recommend to buy. Or hey Jordan, you need to go buy a pair of socks. Here's an option from JD, here's an option from Foot Locker, here's an option from Nike. Which one do you prefer? Right? And how does loyalty play a perspective? And this might be a little counterintuitive, but like I think what's going to drive success for brands is going to be the human touch in the customer experience that you put on a digital experience, which is kind of counterintuitive to everyone talking about agentic.
Yeah,
But
how
like,
does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead.
well, it's like, I don't know, you've walked into Home Depot before, right? Or a building store, and you're like, yep, I can go build a bunch of stuff that I have no qualification building, right? That like feeling that you get when you walk into REI, Home Depot, different things, brands have to start customizing that and building that for themselves. So whether it's in physical retail or whether it's in online, you have to have a compelling reason for people to come back to your store, right? And like being excited to come back, developing loyalty, right? Like I don't think loyalty is just coupons, right? Loyalty is a feeling that you get when you experience their store or a feeling that you get when you're wearing the product or when someone comments on it. And I think that comes from a human element, right? So I think the beauty of like what agentic or AI can help folks do is actually automating a lot of the tedious, mundane tasks while allowing people to actually really focus on like how do you make people feel special? How do you make people feel a connection with the brand or the retail experience that you're building, right? And I
But do
think
you view that as being part of the transaction or as being like above and beyond the transaction or like a separate from the transaction?
I think it's the entire customer experience. Like the moment you come on the page, your message when you're, connecting a transaction, or even like a small thing that we're doing with some of our retailers today is like, hey, when someone's checking out, can we put a notification saying, hey, thanks for being such a good client. Like if you do a return, we're just going to waive your fee, right? The notion of surprise and delight is something that doesn't have to be like an overwhelming gesture. It can be small things that are trickled along the way that make you feel better, right? And I think that's like a big thing we think about it, even in the post-purchase experience. Like, how do we tell you really good tracking updates? Yeah, it's going to be here on the 22nd, right? So you feel really confident in knowing that it's going to be there on the day that it's there. So I view everything as actually human touch as the most important thing for customer experience and retailers.
Amazing. This has been a great interview. Thank you, Jordan. It's been great talking to you.
Yeah,
And good luck with your continued work with both Yofi as a brand and No Fraud as a parent company.
awesome. Appreciate it, man.